How's it going, everyone? This is Calvin from the Cabrillo Marine Aquarium's Collections Department. One of my very favorite pastimes is going out into our local salt marsh environments to check out the diverse array of wildlife that call this habitat home. Unfortunately, we can't always do that, but one of the things we often forget is that there's actually quite a diverse array of wildlife all around us, just right in our own backyards or in our neighborhoods. And so take this time right now to have a walk outside and take a look at the sorts of animals that you can actually find and compare them to things that you might find in a salt marsh. First thing you'll probably notice is grass. Now in the terrestrial environment, grass is pretty much everywhere, and it's actually very comparable to Zostera marina, which is the eel grass that you can find in the salt marsh environments. Now eel grass can be compared to terrestrial grass in a variety of ways. They're very similar. First of all, they're both vascular plants, so eelgrass is actually not a type of algae, contrary to belief. They're actually a type of vascular plant, just like terrestrial grass is. And basically what that means is that they possess a vascular system, which is a series of channels that run through their blades in order to transport both water and nutrients. Another thing that makes them similar is that they're both flowering plants. So terrestrial grass, the flowers are not super obvious. They're wind-pollinated flowers, so they don't rely on attracting any pollinators like bees or butterflies in order to transport their pollen. Another thing that makes them similar is that they provide essential habitat. So terrestrial grass, if you were to dig into the grass, you will find a variety of invertebrates living in it and among it. And eelgrass is the same way. It actually provides essential habitat for both fish and aquatic invertebrates as well. And finally, due to photosynthesis, they both provide oxygen into their environment. Now, I mentioned before that terrestrial grass provides essential habitat, and if you were to dig in through the grass, you're probably going to find a lot of arthropods. Whenever you see insects and spiders and pill bugs, those are all going to be under phylum Arthropoda. And that word means jointed foot, and that refers to anything that has an exoskeleton and has jointed appendages and also sheds their exoskeleton. All arthropods will shed their exoskeleton. It's a process known as ecdysis. Now in the marine environment, in the salt marsh environment, we have a representative called the ghost shrimp. Now the ghost shrimp, just like the insects, are under phylum Arthropoda, and once again that means that they have jointed appendages, and that also means that they possess an exoskeleton that they must shed in order to grow. So that's going to be something that's similar to things like bees, things like ants, as well as even pill bugs, which we might recognize them as roly-polies. There's actually, believe it or not, a variety of species of marine isopod that are very common in the salt marsh environment as well. Okay, so another familiar animal that you might come across in the terrestrial environment is the earthworm. Now the earthworm belongs in a phylum known as Annelida, and that's going to be the segmented worms. They're classified as worms that have distinct body segments, and they often have these hair-like protrusions on them known as chaetae. And in the marine world, you have a representative that's very similar to them. It's also under phylum Annelida, and that's going to be called the polychaete. Now, polychaetes are very, very common in the salt marsh environment. In fact, if you were to dig into the mud, you would find lots and lots of polychaetes. And once again, they are related to our beloved earthworm by being in the same phylum. And they're actually in two distinct classes known as Polychaeta and Oligochaeta. Now, the polychaetes are different in that they actually possess these extra appendages on each segment known as parapodia, and it makes them appear as though they have many, many feet, hence their name. Oligochaetes, like our earthworm, lack the parapodia, and therefore you actually pretty much can't see their chaetae, but you could feel them if you handle them. And finally, we have the garden snail. Now, the garden snail, don't pay attention to that vertebrate that's approaching this poor snail. So anyway, the garden snail is a type of mollusk under phylum Mollusca. That's defined as the soft-bodied animals. Now, the snail is actually a type of gastropod. The word gastropoda means stomach-footed animal, and that's because they have a muscular foot that it's kind of oriented in a position that we would sort of imagine as the stomach, and they use that primarily for locomotion. Now, other members of the mollusca will also have a muscular foot. Sometimes it's modified. They will also always have a shell, and sometimes it's highly reduced. And in the case of some cephalopods, such as the octopus, that is actually completely absent. Now, another very common mollusk that you would find in the salt marsh environment is going to be the clam, which is under the class Bivalvia. Now, bivalvia is a word that means two shells, and that refers to the two shells that are modified on a hinge that clams, mussels, and oysters will all possess. Once again, they're also soft-bodied animals, and they actually do possess a muscular foot, just like the snail. The only difference is that the muscular foot in a clam is actually going to be modified into something like a tongue. It almost looks like a tongue-like structure that protrudes out of from between their shells, and they use it for scooting around and also for digging into sand and into mud. So a good muddy environment like the salt marsh is, of course, going to be a prime habitat for clams. So remember, if you can't make it out to a salt marsh, just take a step outside. You might actually be pleasantly surprised by how much you can find just right in your own backyard. Diversity awaits you. So I hope you all are staying safe, be healthy, and I will talk to you next time.